America's favorite birthday boy, Barack Obama, is back in the news once again for another disastrous decision that was made during his reign as president. So back in 2014, Obama made the decision to release 5 terrorists in exchange for Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl and so it was a 5-for-1 trade deal. Again, pretty bad decision if you were to ask me. Upon some research that I did, the Pentagon was actually really, really concerned about this at the time and basically said, hey, these guys are dangerous. This is not something that you should be doing. So these people were released from Guantanamo Bay, and the Gitmo 5, as they're known as, actually led the movement for the Taliban's seizure of Afghanistan this week. So it's just been this crazy progression, and they also weren't being secretive about this. They literally said while they were in prison that they would do this again. Here's an excerpt from the Post-Millennial this morning. Some of those 5 Taliban commanders reportedly vowed to return to Afghanistan and fight American troops based there, making contact with active Taliban militants. Despite these pledges, the Obama administration turned a blind eye to the intelligence reports and then freed the 5 detainees reportedly from the regime in the exile-based state in Qatar. During recent peace talks, they were recognized by Western diplomats as official representatives of the Taliban, wrote the New York Post. So now we're just openly fraternizing with people who used to be in prison, who are active terrorists who hate America. So, yeah.
Well, a lot of people saw this coming. I was working with the Western Journal back during the Bo Bergdahl situation. I remember that there were lots of predictions that this is not going to end well for America, and it's, I guess, not terribly surprising that we've seen these results.
Yeah, Joey, what do you think? Do you think that was a good decision?
Well, this is a problem not just from the Obama years. In fact, I just saw a picture of Mike Pompeo next to a person that Donald Trump freed from his presidency, who is now also helping with the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. So I don't understand why it is such a common presidential foreign policy to free terrorists. We know these people hate Western culture. Yeah. They hate Christians, yet we release them in some sort of trade-off and hope that they won't do these things again. I think it is idiotic. But, you know, if you look at Obama's overall foreign policy, it was a complete disaster. And now we see Joe Biden becoming like Obama 2.0. So it's not surprising to see these
Joe Biden
people.
Might be worse.
It is worse. He's
Obama.
like Jimmy Carter.
Part of the issue is this is in many ways unconventional warfare, right? Terrorism is unconventional warfare.
Totally.
And it is sort of a maxim of military training that we're always preparing to fight the last war. So when I was in the military in the 80s, much of my training, even though my unit was focused on the desert, I was actually a Middle East expert, but I should say more. I was Middle East focused. I didn't know anything, but they wanted me to be a Middle East focused or Middle East expert, and so Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, that entire region. But we were all the training that we did was focused on Vietnam, because that was the last war that we had fought. So we were preparing for desert warfare and thinking about Vietnam at the same time. None of us were wearing desert camo, for instance, until Operation Desert Shield in Iraq. I wore the same jungle camo throughout the 80s, despite my Middle Eastern orientation as anybody else. So what the last war didn't prepare anybody to do is to deal with prisoners of war who are not actual military personnel, right? These are just people with guns. I mean, terrorists are criminals far more than they are, members of some sort of organized military. Obama took that too far. He tried to deal with all terrorism simply through law enforcement. He didn't want the military involved. That was a mistake. But to only deal with it as if this were a conventional war is also a mistake. So the whole issue requires rethinking of what does a prisoner of war look like? Who is covered by the Geneva Convention? Who should be? What agreements are we going to make about how we treat enemy combatants when they are terrorist combatants and not, coming at us in a formation of 300 men with tanks and rifles and et cetera.
Yeah.
We're just not prepared to deal with it well.
Yeah, and we've seen over the past few days just all of the craziness that's going on. I know, Joey, you and I were talking this morning about a woman who had refused to wear a burqa and was shot this morning. So it's just been crazy how fast that turnover has become. And even CNN, people who are saying that this isn't a big deal and that we're overreacting and blowing this out of proportion. Literally this week, a CNN correspondent was out and about, didn't wear a hijab or whatever, and was out and about doing whatever. And then the next day, the Taliban takes over, and she's suddenly wearing a burqa, and literally says, I thought this was a Babylon Bee article, literally says verbatim, oh, they're chanting death to America, but you know what? They seem mostly friendly.